Just to start, today is May 10th, 2022. This is Brenna Riley with the Preservation Society. And for the record, could you state your full name?
My name is Jean Brooks Murphy.
Perfect. And where and when were you born?
I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, April 21st, 1946, on a glorious Easter Sunday morning.
That's awesome. Could you describe kind of the neighborhood or the house that you grew up in?
I grew up on the west side of Charleston on a street called Ash Street. And I lived there all of my childhood until I was like 20. We lived in that house. And it was a very small neighborhood. And on my one block, that was from Line Street to Shepherd Street at the time, there were 20 teachers and 6 preachers that lived on my block. So we had to do everything right.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very good neighborhood. There were a lot of people my age on the block, and there were a lot of children, a lot of families. So it was a very, very close-knit block.
Awesome. And who all lived in the house with you?
I lived in the house with my mother, my father, and my oldest sister.
Perfect. Could you state all of their names as well?
My father is Benjamin Brooks. My mother is Frances T. Brooks. And my sister is Benita B. Smalls. And my sister just passed recently.
I'm sorry for your loss. Could you talk about your parents a bit?
Oh, my parents, I am so happy to say I had great parents. My mother was a school teacher, and she taught second grade for probably 35, 40 years. So she was a good influence on me and my sister. And my father was always in business. He always ran a business. So we weren't the typical household that sat down for dinner every day at 3. His business made him come in different hours. But I couldn't say that I could have had a greater upbringing with both my parents. I was a daddy's girl.
Mm-hmm.
So as are several people in Charleston. If you talk to the girls in Charleston, everybody's a daddy's girl. And I was the number 1 daddy's girl. My mother used to always say, Jean, you're not the only one that has a daddy, because I would always say, my daddy. So.
And what school did your mom teach at?
My mom taught at Daniel Jenkins, she taught at Mary Ford, and she taught at another school. When integration started, they transferred her out to another school. I don't remember the name of that. By that time, I was gone.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite memories with your parents growing up?
All of my memories are great. One, I can remember that we went to the beach. And as you know, Charleston is surrounded by beaches, but we could not go to those beaches. So we had to go almost to North Carolina to Atlantic Beach. And we went, they'd pack a big lunch and we'd get in the car and go there. And my dad could swim. And I thought that was the biggest thing, because he would get a inner tube tire and we'd float out. So that's one of my good memories. Another good memory was my graduation from college, my debutante ball. It was like a family affair. And my graduation from college, people came from Charleston that knew my family, and they all came to celebrate me. And I thought that was great. My Uncle Albert, who worked with my daddy and his family. And I think that you all know who Henry Smith is. And he came. He flew in that morning for my graduation. So I've got good memories of growing up. There are a lot of people who say, I don't want to come back to Charleston. It's nothing. I love Charleston. I had the best memories of Charleston. So I am back here now to live, and I am enjoying it very much.
That is awesome. Did you ever get to go with your father to any of his businesses?
Oh, we worked in the businesses. Yeah, we did. We had a business that was a rooming house downtown on Washington Street. And after my dad built the motel, we had a laundromat in the Washington Street properties. So we did our own laundry for the motel, and it was my job to transport the laundry back and forth and back and forth. So yes, and as we got older, the motel opened when I was in the 12th grade. So when I'd come home in the summers, I'd have to work the desk. And so yeah, we didn't work outside of our family businesses, which I really wanted to do, but that was not allowed. So yes, I did work in the family business and had lots of good times.
Yeah. What are some of your experiences while you were working in the family businesses?
Well, when I worked in the family business, it was we worked the front desk. We gave people days off, my sister and I, and the good part was meeting all the people who would come in, the notable peoples, the Jesse Jacksons, the Coretta Scott Kings, Andy Young, James Brown, Jackie Wilson, all of the entertainers, because they would have to come and stay with us because there really wasn't another place for blacks to stay in town at the time. So that was one of the good things about it.
Wow. Were you ever starstruck by people coming in?
Not really. I wanted to see Coretta King, and I wanted to meet her, and Andy Young, and those people that were in the movement at the time, because I had just gone off to college, and I went to college in Atlanta, so I had already met the people in the civil rights movements, the Stokely Carmichaels, the Rap Browns. I was around them all the times, but to meet Coretta Scott King and Gene Young, that was a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm. How else was the business involved with the civil rights movement?
Well, they had all their meetings there. When people would come to town, they would have all of their meetings. We had built a motel and a new restaurant, and at the time, that's where everybody met. Everybody in town met at Brooks, and we had one part of the building was what we called the garden room. And you could rent it out to have social functions. And so when they would have their meetings, everybody would come. And that was interesting also because they would be trying to get together what they were going to do and make plans and, that kind of thing. So
did you or your father have direct ties to the civil rights movement in Charleston?
Not direct ties. I mean, we marched.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and my uncle were a part of it, but not like out front, standing in the front of the marchers. Mm-hmm. But they supported it. They supported it with financially, and they supported it by having our businesses there to help them.
And were you close with your uncle as well?
Oh. There was no better uncle than my Uncle Albert. He was my dad's youngest brother. He was just like my dad. We talked about last week that I had one of these uncles that said, "You can tell me anything. No matter what happens, talk to me. Let's work it out." So he was very supportive. Never missed a birthday, a Christmas, my Easter birthdays. So I had all of my uncles were good, but my Uncle Albert was probably the one that I was closest to.
Mm-hmm. And did you have really close ties with your whole family as well?
Oh, the whole family. My dad had 9 sisters and brothers, so they were all a part of the business in some way. My oldest uncle, my Uncle Marion, had a business down in the marketplace because before the Morris Street businesses. We were downtown Charleston on State and Cumberland Streets, and we had a restaurant there. And the family lived next door to the restaurant, and some of the family lived above the restaurant. And my grandmother lived in the house across the street from the restaurant on Cumberland Street. So we a very close-knit family. And my Uncle Willie owned a grocery store at 111 Line Street that's still there. So, yeah, we stayed pretty close.
Mm-hmm. Is your family still in Charleston?
Yes. I'm the oldest in the family now. I have one cousin who is 91, and he's in a facility at this point, has a little dementia. That's my Uncle Willie's son. And other than that, it's me, but I have lots of cousins here. And I have cousins moving back from Minnesota, and I have a cousin in Virginia. That's he and his wife are both doctors, and now they're running a farm to table business after they retired from medicine. So yes, and they come home all the time. Mm-hmm. So our family's pretty much still here.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've mentioned a bunch of the businesses,
mm-hmm.
but could you kind of list out the businesses that your Uncle Albert and your father owned together?
If we start on Morris Street, the businesses that we had, 52 Morris Street was a pool room. And it was a new building that we built. And 56 Morris is the real estate office. It originally started out being a restaurant. That's where we started the restaurant uptown when we moved from State and Cumberland. And so 56 Morris was a restaurant, and then we turned it into a real estate office. And then 60 Morris Street was the Motel. Across from the Motel was the restaurant. And I think the number on that could have been 57 Morris. It was a restaurant, and that's when I was telling you the garden room was attached. And now that business building belongs to Danny Martin, and he took over that building. And we had pool rooms on King Street across from the News and Courier. We had a pool room on Aiken Street. We had rooming houses on Washington Street, 73, 75, and 77 Morris Street. So, and most of the houses on Felix Street we owned, because that was like connected to the restaurant when it was there. So I think it was number 2, number 4, Felix.
Mm-hmm. How did your father and uncle get involved with owning all these businesses?
Well, one of my older uncles, Henry, had gone to school in New York. And when he came back, he was the oldest. And since there were 9 of them, they had to, they were poor. So they had to, find something to do. I think my Uncle Henry was probably very business-minded. And when he came back, as they told me, there was a big storm down in Florida. And a lot of people went down there to work and make money. And my Uncle Henry did. And when he came back, he bought some businesses. He bought the business at 111 Line Street. And he started out with that. And my uncle died very young. He was probably in his late 40s when he died. And so at that time, there was nobody at the top of the family running it, because my grandfather died when my father was probably 11 or 12. He passed. So there were, I think, 6 boys and 3 girls. So the boys had to go out and work. And so when my uncle died, my dad was then one of the older ones. And they went out to work, and they went on and carried on the businesses that my uncle had started. My Uncle Albert is the youngest in the family. And so he was going off to college. And my Aunt Evelyn, they were the two youngest. And my family was so proud that they were going to have two people in college. And then the war came, and my Uncle Albert got drafted. My Aunt Evelyn went on to finish school and become the physical ed teacher at Burke. And she died very young. And she got sick and died. That destroyed my family, because that was all of their hopes and dreams, to have, somebody who had gone to college and come back home and work in the businesses. So my daddy took over, and while my uncle was in the service. And then when they came home, they decided, we got these businesses, and it's the two of us. My Uncle Willie had gone off onto his own, and he was running the grocery store. And so I had an Uncle Johnny that worked in all of the businesses. So, and my Aunt Louise worked in the restaurant. So, it was really a family kind of business. And my Uncle Albert came back and went to New York and went to school and got his real estate license.
Did your uncle or father tell you any stories about their time operating the businesses?
Oh, there are all kinds of stories. They worked hard. And, I would say it was like at any other time in our city when we were probably one of the only places African Americans had to come and go out for a nice dinner. We had a very nice restaurant. Everybody came. Sundays we were full with all neighborhood people that we knew. After church coming to eat, and we were closed on Tuesdays. And on Tuesdays, that was our day to cook crab. And we would have these big crab fests at my grandmother's on Tuesdays because everybody was off. Like I said, we got to meet a lot of people. We got to do lots of things. I remember one summer, one of the good stories we had was we did business with Budweiser. And they would bring their yacht to town. And they would let us use it for one afternoon. And we always loved it because all of the flatware and the silverware on the yacht had the initials AB on it. So we just assumed that meant Albert Brooks for my uncle. So that was a good memory.
What food was served at the restaurant?
Oh, our specials were lima beans, which is a big meal in Charleston. So we have lima beans and beef stew, okra soup. Those were the things that we call them on the hot plate every day. They were on they would always be there, the soups and stuff. And then you could order, but it was basically what we call soul food, macaroni and cheese. We got cinnamon buns there was a bakery called Taylor's Bakery that was run by an African American, and it was on Spring Street. And they made the best cinnamon rolls in town. So we would have that and all kinds of pies and good food. Good food.
Did you have a favorite?
My favorite was beef stew. I love the beef stew. And my sister they would cook food. Mine was like a brown beef stew. And they would also cook it in tomatoes. I don't know if you know, but in Charleston, tomato-based foods are very popular. Everybody eats okra soup, fried chicken, and macaroni and cheese on Sundays. And it's always a tomato base. Red rice is a tomato base. That just comes with being from Charleston.
Were they family recipes?
I guess they were, but nobody ever wrote it down and said this is so and so's recipe. It's like everybody knew how to cook it, you know.
Yeah. And then back to where you grew up. What schools did you attend?
I attended Rhett Elementary School, and that was a few blocks away from where we lived. And we had to pass Mitchell School, which was all white at the time, to get to Rhett. So we went to Rhett in elementary school, and then in the 7th grade, they opened Simonton School as like a junior high school. So I went to 8th grade at Simonton. It was the first time that all of the elementary schools came into one building for 7th and 8th grade. But the year that I went, it was only 8th grade. And then after 8th grade at Simonton, I went to Burke. And I did my 4 years at Burke.
Did you go to school with a lot of the childhood friends you had in the
Everybody, and I'm still friends with them.
Still to this day?
To this day. We talk. In fact, one of my good friends is home this weekend to see his mother, who's 98. So, yeah, we all kept in touch. I think I had probably one of the largest graduating classes from Burke. At that time, we were like 368 people, and that was a big deal. So most of the people that lived on that street that I told you where I grew up, Ash Street, the principal of the high school lived next door. Everybody, you know, we had a lot of people. And like I said, we're still in touch with them.
Mm-hmm. Did many people stay in Charleston?
No, not a lot. If I think about the street that I lived on, we have some people, I don't know if you all know who Delano Meriwether is, but Delano Meriwether distributed and started, I guess he developed the flu vaccine. And so that's why I take it every year, because he lived 2 doors from me. And his sister is still here, but he went on to become the front cover of Time magazine, saying that he did that and that he also was a runner. And that's how they had him on the front. People across the street, the Bowdens across the street, Gary Bowden is an architect, and he developed worked on the development of the Baltimore Harbor. So we have 2 girls, the one that lived, Debbie Mechanic, that lived on the corner, and Teresa Singleton. They both worked at the Smithsonian. And so we had some people that did some good stuff. We had Miriam Gibson, who is in Atlanta, and she is an attorney and a social worker. So there were a lot of people that went on to do a lot of great things that lived on our block.
Could you describe Morris Street?
Oh, Morris Street was very vibrant when we were there, because not only our family businesses that went down on both sides of the street on Morris Street, and I'm talking Morris from Cumming to Jasper. There were lots of other businesses, and so it was a fish market. It was Herbie Frazier's Fish Market. It was Sindab Cleaners. You know, it was a lot of other businesses that it was very vibrant. People were always walking up and down the streets, and you know, that's where they came to get food. There was a little grocery store, whatever it was. The Whites had another business over on the other side of the Morris Street, closer to Cumming. So there was, you know, that kind of business that was, something was always happening.
Mm-hmm. So who would you say your businesses served mostly?
Oh, it served the African American population in Charleston. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody came to Morris Street. You know, there were doctor's offices. Now, there were lots of doctor's offices. There was Dr. Brown, the dentist. There was Dr. Burris. There was Dr. Holloway. All up and down Morris Street, there were, you know, businesses.
And could you tell us more about Philip Simmons' ironwork on the Brooks Restaurant building?
Okay, Mr. Phillip was, as we called him, Mr. Phillip, was at the restaurant every single day. That's where he took all of his meals. So we knew him just like we knew our family. And most of the men in town were there. They would come to meet and talk and laugh. And Mr. Phillip once told me that he was from Daniel Island. And he would take a boat from Daniel Island to Charleston. And they would come, you know where the custom house is? The boat would come in down there. So he did all of any building that we owned had his ironwork on it. My home still has his ironworks on it. And all of the restaurant, the old restaurant, had all of his work on it.
And then when did the businesses close, and what do you remember about that time?
Integration made a hard hit on our businesses because then people just didn't have to come to us. They could go other places. I think that was one of the things that slowed our businesses down. And then my uncle and my dad's age. And I think that it got to be where there was a lot of drugs around during that time, and you couldn't control it. I don't know if the police could have controlled it, but it got out of hand for the age that my family was at that time. And so that was one of the reasons, because you couldn't determine who was coming in, who was checking in or checking out. And so we did our best to do the right thing. And then I guess, gentrification, that started happening. And that's where we are now.
Yeah. How have you seen Charleston as a whole change over time?
Oh, I think Charleston as a whole, they have progressed. What I do remember is we didn't have, until the strike came, the hospital strike came. I guess it was blacks were here, whites were here. We intermingled where we had to for business, and that was it. But I see Charleston changing now. Like, there are no black people on the peninsula. They have slowly kind of moved away. The taxes are exorbitant. And just to stay here. So I think a lot of times when the blacks who are on the peninsula, as they died out, their kids were like, well, we'll sell our house or we don't live here anymore. That kind of thing. And I think Charleston is becoming, well, we know it's a city with a lot of tourists. So things are very, very expensive. And most people who work here can't afford to live on the peninsula. So that's how I've seen it change. And all I see right now are babies and dogs. So.
What do you see, or what do you hope to see for the future of 56 Morris Street and the other family-owned businesses?
Oh, I just want to see them. What I'd like to see for Charleston, I should start. What I'd like to see for Charleston is affordable housing and good health care. I think there is no affordable houses in Charleston right now. I think that, every time somebody says something, they're talking about, this is going to be affordable housing. Well, affordable housing to people who don't make a lot of money. It's not $1,800 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. And that's what it is. And, now the people are doing the Airbnbs where they can make $3,000, $4,000 a weekend. So it's very hard for a regular working person to be able to afford an apartment or a house. And I'd like to see Charleston do more to accommodate those people who really made the city, who were a big part of making the city, that they could have some place to live. Because right now, from end to end, the east side to the west side, everybody is, tearing down houses, old houses, putting up new apartments, but none of them are affordable.
And what are your hopes for like the preservation of?
Oh, I'd just like to see, for my family's business, I'd like to see them acknowledged. I'd like to see a plaque up that said, this is where it was. I would really love to see the name of Felix Street changed to Brooks. I mean, I don't know who Mr. Felix is or Miss Felix is. I don't know. But I do know that most people now do know the Brooks family. I mean, it's 50 years or more. I mean, we were around since 1939. Our first business was on Calhoun Street, about 33 Calhoun. And then we had another business at 47 Calhoun that's still standing. The building is still standing. So I'd like to see their names put up on a street sign or a plaque that says, this is where the heart of our black businesses were. And we had several black businesses all around Charleston, not just my family, but other families. So I'd like to see that happen.
Me too. How do you want your father and your uncle's legacy to be remembered?
Oh, my father and my uncle, their legacy is remembered. They were businessmen. They helped other people. They just didn't do well themselves. They helped other people do well. We employed hundreds of people over the years. And I'd like people to know that most of those people were buried by my dad and my uncle. Every year at Christmas, we would have to go and put poinsettias on their graves. And one good story that I have is right after Hugo. The grounds were saturated. So when you went to the graveyard, you just stood in it. And my dad was there like, okay, bring my sister and I bring these poinsettias on out. And my sister was, Dad, I have on my good shoes. He said, oh, they look nice to me. So he didn't even realize what she was saying. But we went and we put them on each grave. And so many people he helped. I've read articles where people say, they got me started. They loaned me the money to get started with my business. Jim French with the newspaper here, he said in an article before he died, he went to them and they gave him the money. And they were just good men. And they were very family oriented. You don't do anything but take care of your family. If you do nothing else, you take care of your family. And for them, everybody was family. They wanted all of us to go to college. And we all did. And my dad's saying was, every tub should sit on their own bottom. And to this day, we think that. And we also knew that every generation should do better than the generation before them. So we strive to do that. We strive to help our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, our cousins. We all want to make sure that everybody does good. Yeah, there's some good things. I mean, when you see the people, they would come together. Black people would come together and try to do things or make things better. And that's one of the things that I liked. My dad always taught us you can help anybody. Although we were probably, because they had businesses, we had extra. We had things that maybe some other people didn't have, but that was not to say we were better, but we could help. And that's what we did. And that's what my dad did. And my uncle, they helped everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's too many people in this town that knew them that wouldn't tell you that. And I'm older than now, so I can understand and realize all of the things, the lessons that he taught, the lessons that they taught us, you know. And, one other thing I can say, when you said a memory, I don't know how, but a memory, one of my best memories of my father was he would take us in the car individually, but me most of all. And we would ride down to the Battery. And that was we did that almost every day. We'd ride around the Battery and look at the water and stuff. And he would give lectures on morality, education, and how to spend money. And to this day, I remember all of them. When I was in college, whenever I got ready to do something I know I really shouldn't do, I would say to myself, my daddy would be very disappointed. My mother was understanding and a very strong woman. But she could deal with it. But my daddy would be disappointed. And that's the way I lived my life. I never wanted to disappoint them. So, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. My husband is great, and he's from Charleston, and we met in high school.
Wow.
And we went to different colleges, and we got married after college, and we've been married 55 years.
Wow.
So, I've had very good life. I got to do many things that I was in the retail business most of my adult life. And I got to do so many things that I probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to do. But my mother always was, you can always teach. And I did. I taught at Clark Atlanta. I taught fashion buying, introduction to fashion buying, fashion merchandising. I taught at FIT in New York. I got to travel all over the world, so I think I'm always very proud of people from Charleston, because people from Charleston do extraordinary things. If you ever, you follow up on some of the people that are from here and what they've done. There was one gentleman, and his name is Merton Simpson, and he is the foremost African art person in the world. And he was from Charleston. And he had a studio on Madison Avenue in New York. And I just think, I never heard anybody black having a studio on Madison Avenue. And he did. And he was from Charleston. He grew up with my parents. So I think that there's so much about Charleston that we don't know, or people don't really know the people from Charleston and the things that they did. But there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of good stories. And that's with fashion. If you want to be in the fashion business, you definitely had to be in New York. And I worked for the biggest people in New York, the biggest stores. And so I got to do things that, like, I got to dress Kenny Rogers or sit with Martha Stewart or Sierra, just so many of Russell Simmons, P. Diddy, all of those people I got to interact with. I got to do a show for P. Diddy with 2,000 people and his children and all of the people that come along with him, all of the celebrities. I got to dress Stacey Abrams. So some of those things, Gladys Knight, Patti LaBelle, all of those people I've gotten to really. Cicely Tyson was one of my shows. And she told me, one of the things she told me was, as I sat in her room, she said, always take one day of the week to yourself. She said, no answering the telephone, no making calls, no texting, just sit there and think about what you need to do for yourself and just relax for one day. And she lived until she was like 96 or 97. So I figured she must have known something. I started a program in Atlanta, and the name of it was Fashion and Art, the Art of Fashion. And I had Iman come. And Iman is a good friend of mine with David Bowie. And she came and did it for me. And we did it in an art gallery, and we did a big picture frame, a huge picture frame, and had all the models walk through the picture frame.
Cool.
So I thought that was really, really neat.
Were your parents alive to kind of see you rise up in your career?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My parents were alive. And my sister went just about every place with me. You know, I'd say, well, I'm getting ready to go to Las Vegas. Let's go. And, you know, she was, but my parents did get to see my career. And I think they were pretty proud. I remember my daddy said, why are you wearing pants? And then several years afterwards, he said, you know, Jeannie, I remember just said, why is she wearing pants? And then all of a sudden, every woman wore pants. So they did see. And, you know, Charleston is a fashion place.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people constantly that there's no place that I have ever been that has stuff that they don't have in Charleston. The store owners here, Ann's and Ellis's and Bob Ellis, and I was with Bob Ellis and his wife in London when Hugo hit Charleston. And we stood on the corner saying, what's happening to our city? Because we were going to see, you know, when you go to London, you have to go to the theater every night.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do anything else, you go to the theater. And we were going to the theater. We were going to see the same show. And we saw each other and we were like, yeah. But I think Charleston is probably one of the, I love Charleston for the fashion. And I think if you notice, everybody in Charleston is kind of spiffy. People are really spiffy in Charleston. And I remember, you never saw a man with his shirt out of his pants. And we were growing. You couldn't go in my daddy's pool room with your shirt out of your pants. You couldn't. Everybody was always neat. And I lived in New York for a long time. And I remember going in the garment center and I saw a guy and he said, you're Brooks, you're from Charleston. He was pushing the racks and he had his shirt in his pants. And they never looked shabby. That was one thing that the people in Charleston are very prideful about how they look and how they present themselves. And there's a book that is called A Short History of Charleston. It's by Robert Rosen. And in it, he said that the people in Charleston, the people that worked in the homes and the cooks, on Sunday, you wouldn't know the difference between them and the people they worked for. Because that was one of the things that they said. Even though they had to do menial work, they still had pride about how they looked and how they presented themselves. And that's the way I think of Charleston. And you have to say for the merchants, too. They did it. I mean, if you want a pair of shoes, and it wasn't in Bob Ellis, it wasn't to be had. And I have been a lot of places and looked at a lot of shoes, but they would have it all. So. Yeah.
You've talked about a little bit before just your father's relationship with some of the other business owners, like Mr. Ellis, like Mr. Berlin.
Oh, yeah.
And just, kind of what was that like?
Okay. I think my dad and Mr. Berlin family had a relationship for as long as I knew. And I had a birthday party. My sister and I gave my dad a birthday party for his 90th birthday. And Mr. Berlin came. And he stood up and gave his testimony, and Judge Fields and all of the people in town who were friendly with Daddy. And Mr. Berlin said that they had known each other since they were children. And that my Uncle Henry, who was the oldest of my daddy's brothers, there was one when my Uncle Marion was the oldest, but my Uncle Henry started it. He said that they had the same names in their family as my dad had in his family. There was an Alvin, we had an Albert, there was a Henry, we had a Henry, and he just was naming it. And he said when they grew up, my Uncle Henry used to take him to school on his bicycle. He used to sit on the handles of his bicycle, and my Uncle Henry would ride him on his bicycle. And to this day, one of the funny things is my dad always got his clothes from there. And as he got older and he was not moving around as much, he'd say, you just go there, they know what I like. So I went down there and bought a couple of suits, and they were pretty expensive. And Mr. Berlin told me, he said, now, Gene, this is the shirt and tie that goes with it. But don't tell your daddy you got it from here, because he'll make you bring it back. You can get the shirt and tie from someplace else, but he's going to say it's too much. But, you know, they knew each other and they had a relationship. And to this day, I have a relationship with Stephen. I still go down. Try not to buy too much, but yeah, he had a relationship, and so did my Uncle Albert. My Uncle Albert was probably more involved in the community. My daddy was kind of quiet and laid back. My Uncle Albert probably had more. He was the treasurer of Clyburn's first campaign. And they had their first meetings in the restaurant or in Judge Fields' office, you know. So I don't think there's too many people that we didn't know around and, you know, had some kind of dealings with. Mm-hmm. And every day, Daddy and I, after school at Simonton, every day after school, I'd go across the street to the restaurant, and we would... Do you know where the cemetery is up off of Meeting Street? There's a bunch of cemeteries back there. Mm-hmm. That's where I learned how to drive. Because there was nobody back there driving, so I could turn corners and back up. Then Daddy had a horse, what we call those wooden horses built, so I could learn how to parallel park. I'm probably the best parallel parker you know. And, yeah. We did that every day. And he had, because a lot of my family is buried there, so Dad would say, let's go. We go visit, and we drive for an hour and a half every day after school. So I got my license. I could drive in the mornings from 6 in the morning till 6 in the afternoon by myself. And then at 6 in the afternoon till 6 in the morning with an adult. You know, with somebody else that had a driver's license. So I thought I was pretty hot. Nobody else, you know, no other young girl was there. There was a couple of other people driving, but I had a car, and I could drive.
What was your first car?
A 52 Chevy. It was like a box. And I mean, it was really a box. And one day we were on King Street, my sister and I was driving, and the car stopped, and she got out and pretended she didn't know me. But I had a Chevy, and I had to share it with my Uncle Albert's son, my cousin Al, but he was younger, so you know I was the top dog there. Mm-hmm. And then I got a new car when I finished high school. Then I got another new car when I finished college. And I told somebody, you couldn't, where I went to school, with the times that I went to school, girls couldn't have cars. And you definitely couldn't have a car on campus. And I was in Atlanta, and 2 maybe 2 weeks before graduation, my dad flew me and one of my girlfriends home and let me take the car back. And I parked it down the street from the school. You know, I had all my friends that I like. I gave them a ride and stuff. And the day we were leaving, my parents came in and we were driving back to Charleston. Graduation was over. The dormitory matron said, "Miss Brooks, I like your new car." So she really knew what was going on the whole time. You know, like I said, I have good memories of Charleston. I love Charleston. I just would like my family and the people I know to be recognized for their contributions to the city, because we made many contributions.